midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am super excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Vincent Tse. He is the Senior Director of Staff and Strategy at HiFiBiO. Vincent, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Christina, for taking the time to just chat with me about company culture. It's something I'm super passionate about. So as you said, I'm Vincent Tse, he, him, his. And it's a funny question because when I thought about this, funny enough, early on, it was to be a Power Ranger. Obviously, that wasn't an actual job. But as I got a little older, it came a bit more concrete. I loved the science. I loved helping people, and I loved organizing events. I was always the party planner among my group. I still am, actually. So I wanted to be actually a doctor growing up, but found a time where I realized it wasn't the right place for me. It wasn't the right situation, but I still wanted to be close to the science and to help people. And so then I got into biotech, and I started my career as a scientist, but then slowly realized that although I love the science, I really much rather enjoyed getting people together, helping organizations, doing it at a much higher scale rather than being at the bench. And so I transitioned from doing the science on the bench to helping organizations. And now, luckily, I can do that as Director of Staff and Strategy here at HiFiBiO.
I love that. I feel like I also held at one time wanted to be a Power Ranger too because it looked very cool. And
so cool.
I'm sure you're helping people on a day-to-day basis and really helping to form a company culture from the ground up. And as a leader, how do you think your personal journey has really led you specifically at the organization and to be a leader?
Yeah, great question. I've always been inspired by seeing other individuals help their communities. In college, I was part of an Asian American association where I actually helped community service, held community service events, particularly in disadvantaged Asian communities. And I think that was during that time when I really understood how I wanted to make an impact in the world. It's not only helping these disadvantaged communities specifically, but in the general population. And I realized that healthcare was the best way to do so. And what better way to do that than to help organizations who are doing great healthcare work, particularly in the biotech industry, to develop life-changing drugs for individuals.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of room for more accessibility and opportunity in healthcare as well. And you mentioned that you have a background in science, which I feel like is the story for some, but not all. How has that really helped you in driving the strategy of the business, especially with other executives who maybe don't have that background?
Yeah, I think it's a really unique situation where you can leverage both sides of your science and your business. Particularly in a super technical industry like pharmaceuticals and biotech, where the products you're making are literally discovered by scientists, right? They've never before been put in humans. And so you do have this really lengthy discovery and development process, which takes into account not only understanding the science of it, which of course has to be there, is first and foremost the most important thing. But at the end of the day, you are running a business and you have to understand, in order for this drug to make it to market, it has to be a viable product, right? There has to be patients who can use it. There has to be people who are willing to pay for it. And I won't go into the whole insurance bit of it, but it's really that duality where you have to understand that it has to fit both sides of it. It has to be good science, but also has to make business sense. Otherwise, a company can develop a great drug, but there is no end user, for instance, or they develop a drug where it doesn't meet the right price point, or it doesn't recoup any of the investments, and the company may go under. And in that sense, you can't continue making new drugs because you don't have the investments to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. And you mentioned kind of the ecosystem too. You have internal employees at your organization, kind of the patients and the community as well. And a lot of folks are talking about kind of their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies too at at their company. So I definitely want to ask, what are kind of key pillars at HiFiBiO's like strategy, and what the goals are?
Yeah, that's super important, especially for a company like ours, where we are relatively small for a biotech, around 100 people globally. But it's that global part that's really important because we do have a multicultural staff around the world in China, Hong Kong, the U.S., and France. And it really goes into our strategy of DEI. Particularly, we have three pillars we're looking at. One is scientific curiosity. So above all, we want individuals who come in to be super curious about the science, right? It's our bread and butter. It's what we do. And if you're not passionate about the science, it's really hard to get through the past the multiple failures you may encounter in the lab, right? Because nothing happens ever the first time. And it's the end goal that you're really working towards. It's the patient, and understanding the science behind it is crucial. So scientific curiosity is number one. Number two is transparency. And I think for us, because we are multicultural, we are global, we we pride ourselves on being super transparent with not only each other, so peer to peer, but also up and down. So transparent in the actions we take, the decisions we make as a company, telling our employees the rationale for it, like if we are making a switch, why, what's the business reason of there's always a business reason for it, as well as transparency in how we make decisions in our strategy. Particularly, for instance, what type of drug to develop versus not, what kind of therapeutic area we want to go into, and how we can best use our technology to do so. And the last thing is equity. And
Yeah.
coming back to it's being equal with not only each other and understanding we are all individuals, we all should respect each other at the same level, but on a cultural level too. We have different cultures. We may experience different things and have different perspectives. And even in any particular meeting, you may interpret results in two different ways. And you just have to understand a way to work through it and to work it in a way that's productive.
Absolutely. And I think it's important too, when you have these three main pillars, you have common language to discuss this with your team as well. You know, it's baked into the values. And when we're talking about transparency, equity, and also kind of this scientific curiosity, it could be hard to measure. I know people have different kind of philosophies when it comes to measuring belonging and equity. What is kind of your mechanisms for measuring progress towards goals? Because we know that what gets measured, gets invested in, it gets funded in. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, in measuring goals, we have our typical annual review process where we have our goal setting process. One of the things we really care about is each individual's personal and professional growth, right? Not only are you here doing a job that you have been brought in to do from a technical and capable perspective, but we also ask individuals to put down their short and long term goals as part of their goal setting process at the beginning of the year. So not only do they have milestones and objectives that are tied to their role, but we also want to make sure that they're hitting their professional goals that they want to. So this means whether you want to continue growing as an individual contributor, as a scientist, right, learning new skills, maybe taking on a project, or perhaps maybe someone like me who started in science, but now realizing maybe I want to be more on the business side. I want to learn more about how to run an organization, how to maybe do business development, right? And so I think that's where we our strength is. It's allowing people to access these opportunities where otherwise perhaps maybe at a larger company you're more siloed in the sense of you're stuck in your own role doing a particular type of experiment or project, and you may not have the freedom to go explore something else as easily.
Yeah, and you definitely, there's a ton of research that supports that when your employer, when your manager is invested in your career development, you're more likely to stay at the organization. And you can tell when people are being authentic and intentional, asking those right questions and opening those doors for you too. You talked about how kind of HiFiBiO is like a global organization, and there's a lot of different cultures represented, and a lot of multinational organizations have kind of equity strategies, and that means kind of different things for different folks as one example. When you're thinking
Mhm.
about scaling company culture, understanding that it's super dynamic, it's never static or staying in one place, how do you strategize what pieces need to be local and what should be really global?
Yeah, and it's funny because I came to this organization in the midst of COVID. It was 2020, so my all my strategies and ideas I love doing, or a lot of it were in person based, and so I really had to shift my strategy, especially on a global company where there's different time zones, obviously. But I also needed to have the company feel like they were together, right? We're one company. We're not HiFiBiO China, HiFiBiO US, HiFiBiO France, and part of that was really getting people to know each other at a personal level, right? Obviously, people have meetings together, they talk about what they need to do on their projects, but never really got to understood on a personal level how they interacted, what are their favorite hobbies, things like that. So one of the first initiatives I launched was just a simple company newsletter, right? A lot of companies have it, and I'm not reinventing the wheel, but it offered an opportunity for people to share some personal information that they wanted to. For us, we had a get to know section where we reached out to at least two individuals every month to share their favorite hobbies, music, food, funny picture, things like that. And then most recently, this past quarter, we did a digital scavenger hunt where each site would get a list of items where they would have to find, quote unquote, and they found it by taking a picture of it. So let's say it could be yourself in a funny costume or something orange, right? Something, and we was each site was submitted, and it would be a competition to see who can get the most items on the list. And the points would be based off of how hard it was, or if it was a dance, how great the dance was. So I think that really helped showcase people to get outside of strictly their role and what they do at the company and get into their more personal side.
Yeah, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that people are, or reinforced that people are full humans inside and outside of work, and we're all wearing so many different hats. So creating those meaningful moments of connection, conversations, is really important too to culture, and just it's a win-win for everybody because people are able to produce better work and kind of have an opportunity for collaboration as well. And I appreciate those examples you mentioned that you kind of started during COVID too. And I wanted to ask if there are any other examples of where you've innovated in kind of that internal employee engagement or experience space during this time too, whether it's an initiative, process, or policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I shifted to more on-site and have my HR leads, do something virtual, I mean, in person as well. One of the things that at least I wanted really when growing up and starting my career was learning more about financial literacy, understanding what are taxes, what's credit score,
Yes.
how do you get a mortgage, how do you buy a house, right? All this stuff. What's the difference between a 401k and a Roth?
Mm-hmm.
And and they don't teach in school, unfortunately. If they do, great school, but otherwise you normally wouldn't get it. And so I was realizing a lot of time people were coming up to me in my offices asking these questions, and just something I'm super passionate about as well. And so I partnered with a local company here in Cambridge. It's a credit union, and now we have at least a monthly session where they come in and talk about these topics. So I get people's feedback on what topics they want to hear next. Most recently, it was everything you need to know about a mortgage, how to get pre-approved, how to find a place. Granted, the market these days it's kind of rough, but nevertheless, it's a time where we need to not only provide a meaningful workplace, right, but provide a holistic well-being package for employees, right?
Mhm.
We care not only about your professional growth, but personally and financially, we want to make sure you are as best as you can be.
Mm.
Um, we felt like if you are struggling maybe to think about finances, then you can't really do the best you can at work.
Yeah.
And it's part of the same strategy of keeping people engaged.
Absolutely. And financial wellness is not only compensation, that's table stakes, but it's also benefits in terms of healthcare. It's understanding, it's true, the difference between your Roth and 401k, especially for new, graduates and for folks earlier on in their career as well, no matter their educational background too. So that definitely resonates with me as well. You mentioned kind of the market being tough, and I think in terms of talent, a lot of folks are experiencing this because during this time we've also reflected on what we want to spend 40 plus hours a week doing, and people have been calling it the great resignation, the great reset, the great reshuffle.
Yeah.
Have you been impacted and kind of your team in terms of a retention strategy during this time?
Yeah, I think it would be the missive to say if no company had experienced retention issues, right? It's really not necessarily a bad thing. To be honest, in my opinion, because this period gave a time for people to actually sit back and think: Is this what I want to be, or is this what I do as a career, right? Is this something I want to continue developing and growing into, and professionally developing my skills to be the best at this particular role, right? Could be a scientist, could be accounting, whatever you're doing. And our philosophy is that we, of course, want to attract people that have the same passion and mission for helping patients and developing new drugs. That being said, if there are individuals who ultimately realize, hey, this may not be what I want to do,
Right.
and it would be bad for us to say, no, you should stay here just because we need you, right? There are definitely other people we can get who perhaps may share a similar passion as us that may be a better fit. And on the employee side, we don't want them to just stay for the sake of feeling bad, right? We want to make sure the mutual separation. And so I don't think during this time it's been necessarily any different than anywhere else. Maybe perhaps folks are just being more realistic with what they want to do and maybe taking a bigger risk to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that yes, we have lost some individuals who ultimately they decided this may not be the best place for them and found a place that could be a better fit. But on the flip side, we've also brought in amazing individuals who share our same vision and drive to help patients using our technology. So overall, I think it's been a great, some call it a reset, and I agree. I think it's a great reset for everyone to just start over if they need to.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great point of reflection because when people are at different points of their career as well, you might want different things. And, just like company culture, people are dynamic and it's okay, to have that kind of growth and to bring on new team members. So change is ever present. I know you talked earlier about kind of that really authentic investment in the careers of folks at the organization. And I want to touch on upskilling and what that really looks like in practice. What kind of training or educational opportunities do you offer for folks?
Yeah, this goes back to like career goals and understanding what you want to do. For us, we don't have a official training program. I think that part of my goal is to develop something like that. But in the short term, what we've done is really on the job training for individuals who want to explore other things. I'll provide an example. So I have a colleague who is doing operation work in Europe, and she's amazing at the work. But in her prior career, she was more involved in the clinical side, helping with clinical trials. And so during one of our one-on-ones, she expressed interest in doing more of this work. And so within our culture, our approach, I immediately called up our head of clinical and say, do you have any opportunity for her to help you? Because I know your team is also very, very slammed with work. So I understand that she can slot in somewhere and perhaps provide some assistance. And that's really a very common thing that happens is we get employees to speak up about what they want to do in their careers, and we'll try to accommodate them as best they can, while of course also ensuring they can do the work that they are assigned to do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And then we also provide opportunities for them to go to things like seminars, trainings, conferences where they get to present. And And really, we're very flexible in how we approach it. As long as you can demonstrate a valid need for the training or upskilling, we can accommodate as best we can, either internally or if it has to be done externally. And then the last thing we're building is something called HiFi University. It's yeah, it's a currently it's an online training slash university classroom setting where you can really just search for any type of online training videos, and we're slowly gathering more and more content so that hopefully down the road, if individuals not only want to learn about a particular type of Excel skill, for instance, we'll have things like financial literacy on there as well. Something I'm pushing for. So folks don't have to come to me to ask what's different between a 401k and an IRA. They can just go to the university session and find it out.
It sounds like there's a lot of different resources and opportunities as well for career development and career pathing at HiFiBiO as well, which I think is really important when we're talking about kind of these different programs, the sense of belonging, what is local and what is global in terms of values. We're talking about culture, but also employee happiness or satisfaction. And I definitely want to ask you too, from your perspective, what are qualitative and quantitative ways you think about kind of measuring that company culture or employee happiness? Of course, with the caveat knowing, just like in life in general, there's no way for us to be happy all of the time. But what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, from a quality perspective, it's really being on site. I'm in the office every day, just because I love being in the office. When I'm at home, it's kind of boring. And for me, qualitatively, it's just talking to individuals, walking around the office, just checking in, seeing what they're doing at work. That's also really fascinating. But also when I put on events, right, getting feedback from individuals, asking what do you thought of the event, what would you like to change, improve upon it. And on the flip side, folks, I'm glad that folks are not afraid to come to my door and I say, well, this is one event, it was awesome, but we could have changed this and this, right? Or maybe we should not have done this. And it's amazing because then I take that feedback and further iterate. From the quantitative side, it's all about I've done surveys in the past, right? It's a little tricky with surveys because you really have to get a good number of responses, otherwise it might be skewed. So one thing I like to do is just have one-on-ones with people and walk them through like some sample survey questions that I would have asked, just so I can get those answers, or even look at some statistics on our like HiFi University webpage traffic. How many people are actually being engaged with the platform? What can we do to market it better, right? Would it be putting in a newsletter, or would it make you maybe add more multimedia, reading documents? So I'm slowly still moving towards finding better and better ways to track engagement, but it's an exciting process. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that too is just building that trust as well, of getting that anecdotal feedback, and also just people coming to your door too. How do you see kind of this culture of trust, employee feedback, like management really manifesting at HiFiBiO?
It has to start from the top down, right? The management has to have a quote unquote open door policy and be transparent in their communication. And then in that way, employees are more comfortable doing it, going back and saying, okay, these are the questions I want to ask, and I'm not afraid to do it directly rather than maybe to my manager, and my manager speaks to higher ups. So we further fostered that level of culture and open door policy through different events. We're having one today, actually. It's called HiFi Cafe. It's essentially a open forum where folks can ask leaders pretty much anything. And if you think of Reddit, it could be an AMA.
Yeah.
And the purpose is we normally have global town halls where one day everyone on site or globally will log on and we'll have a town hall every quarter. And then there's a Q&A at the end of the session. But we found that a lot of folks still don't feel comfortable asking questions in a very public forum where literally everyone from the company is online. but they find it a little bit better when it's smaller setting, open forum, in person. And so that was the rationale behind doing Hi-Fi Cafe, where it's a super non-committal event, definitely not mandatory, but you can drop in. There'll be fun snacks, drinks, and just sit down and chat with a leader who's there at that time about really anything from high level strategy of what the company is doing to maybe a request for better snacks.
Yes, absolutely. All of the feedback, and I think creating that really intentional space for people to be prepared to kind of ask questions and give that feedback, especially with leaders too, for that modeling behavior is really critical as well for an employee experience and to kind of demonstrate that leaders are invested in the team as well.
Yeah.
Learn.
And something else that we've done that's more on the technical side, but I find really awesome, is we have something called a deep dive session where we invite scientists to do deep dives on any particular type of drug target that they find interesting. And it's a pseudo competition where they bring that research in and present it to leadership and say, I think we should go after this new target because XYZ. And in fact, we've done this process, I think, twice now. And some of our pipeline programs have actually come about because of these deep dives,
Yeah.
where scientists have brought these new targets and we've realized, yeah, this is great. Let's develop and find an antibody against this target. And not only does the scientists who first brought it up be part of the inventorship, right? We of course we give them part of the rights, but we celebrate that this drug that could potentially go into patients was discovered and founded because you did the research and you brought it to the attention of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And on the leadership side, we love that, right? It
Yeah.
not only engages employees, but helps us save some time in finding new targets because we're crowdsourcing it essentially.
And celebrating that curiosity and ownership as well, again, from that leadership perspective and kind of celebrating that too. Vincent, I asked a lot of kind of specific questions around your journey and company culture. Out of the many different things and projects that you're working on, what's the next problem or situation you're currently trying to solve?
It's that globalization problem. As we grow bigger, which is a great thing, part of the struggle is really aligning initiatives, strategies, policies together. So we make sure that what we're doing in the U.S. matches how we're doing it in France and China, and perhaps anywhere else we decide to open an office. And so globalization of these policies among my HR leaders, understanding what is the best way to foster our culture despite different backgrounds of people, different ways of working, and even different roles. A lot of the people at the different sites are not on the same teams, and so the type of work they're doing is very different. But nevertheless, the culture should remain pretty steadfast.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a lot. That's the answer to the question a lot of people um, kind of give as well, because it's really hard and you have to continuously look at iterating on that as well and being really intentional. I guess kind of on the flip side, but in the same vein, in your experience and kind of knowing what we know now and not having a crystal ball for the future, but what is a must have people leaders need to incorporate in their strategy to really be successful?
It's authentic engagement. It's engaging with with not just a team or your direct reports, right? It's everyone in the company. You we want to treat this as a place you come to learn and develop not only in your career but as a person. How to interact with individuals, how to really get the most out of life by also providing impact to something you care about. And for us, it's doing it in a way that's in line with what we with our DII strategy and how we really attract the best individuals to do so.
I love that. I think that is really important to kind of find work that is meaningful and also set up those conditions, really authentic engagement. Again, people can tell when you're being inauthentic or authentic or just providing lip service and no alignment with actions.
Yeah.
Um, We're also in March 2022. Yay, we made it to another March. And this year's theme for International Women's Day, which we celebrated at the beginning of the month, is Break the Bias. And we are in Women's History Month as well. So I want to ask, how are you breaking the bias at HiFiBiO?
I think it's wonderful. It's an amazing way to really get the word out there about gender inequality. Um, I'm happy to say that we do have a female CEO, Liang Schweitzer, and honestly, she is probably the most impressive woman I've ever met. Actually, the reason why I joined the company was it was my second conversation with her, and just her ferocity and passion for the industry and for what she wanted to do with this company made me sign up immediately. And in terms of breaking the bias, right? It's for us, we really focus on growing our female, well, everyone, but particularly helping our female employees grow up to be leaders. A lot of our leaders now actually have started out as your bench scientists and have slowly progressed to become great scientists, great individual contributors through to being project managers, and now can lead a new group of scientists in their journey, in their professional journey. And so for us, it's breaking the bias in terms of having female leaders, but also breaking the bias in terms of ensuring, even though you may not be the most vocal person in the room or the most boisterous, right, or the most um, yeah, just out there, you are still demonstrating impact, and as leaders, we recognize that, right? It's not because you are the loudest in the room, but it's because you are actually putting in the work and seeing the results.
Mm-hmm. Representation in leadership, especially at an executive level, at a manager level, is really telling. And just investing in the careers of women and gender kind of equity across the board. Definitely not a check the box. It's something that everybody is working on, but always like to ask during this time. Vincent, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share with folks who are listening, or maybe underscoring 1 to 2 key takeaways out of all the things that we talked about this afternoon?
Yeah, I think ultimately to build a good culture, it's having the right fit of people. It's your family. It's, to be honest, the people you spend the most time with during the week, during the year, in fact. And it's not just being in the office and getting the work done. I mean, of course, that's our top priority, but it's also, going out to happy hour with them, right? Going to do more social events and bring on a person that may not be a good fit for your company, even though they could be the most technically spectacular uh, candidate in the world. Ultimately, I think won't work because if there is just not the right fit, the person can't really click with anyone else. And it's hard to say. It's hard to build fit, but it's much easier to build technical capabilities, especially in science. So at least for the science industry, that's my perspective and how we try to bring on individuals too. Yes, you have to have the right level of qualifications, but most importantly, we can see you as part of our HiFiBiO family.
Absolutely. You want someone who is aligns with the values that you talked about too, in terms of equity and transparency and scientific curiosity. And also someone who's going to be a culture add too, in terms of they're passionate about being curious and making new findings and also contributing as well. Vincent, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you, Christina. Pleasure.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in that employee feedback management as a requirement for the organization to really succeed overall.